Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode. I was really kind of struggling with what to call this one, and what I settled on was sticky nuisances. And this episode is kind of an example of me using coaching tools on myself so that you can just get a sense of what it can look like to have some coaching, because as many of you know, I'm a practicing physician as well. Of course, I encounter many of the same challenges that we all face. And, stuff bothers me too. So we're going to dive into it. We'll see how this format works. I'd love your feedback, of course, as always. So let me tell you a story, which is that I have someone on my schedule for tomorrow. And by the time you hear this, he will have been seen and gone, or maybe he'll cancel. Who knows? I don't know the end of the story yet. But this is an older guy. He belongs to one of my partners. I'm a primary care physician. And he's coming in because he wants antibiotics for his cough. So everyone who's out there who's listening, who does primary care, urgent care, emergency medicine, this is that guy, right? This is that guy. And I saw this guy a few weeks ago. Again, he's not my patient. He belongs to one of my partners. And he had a day or two of some eye irritation, pretty standard sort of conjunctivitis, which is probably viral. But I went out to get him from the lobby. We don't have nursing staff in our office. We, room our own patients. And I went out to the lobby, and it was about 12 minutes after his scheduled appointment time because the prior appointment had run over. And he looks at me and he says, "Finally." And I said, "I'm sorry." And he said, "Well, I was afraid I was going to run out of parking because, I've only got a few minutes left." And I asked him, I said, "Did you park in a 30-minute slot? Because we have a load unload spot that's right out front." Well, he's like, "Yeah, there was nowhere else to park." I'm like, "Great. Okay." Walking back, I see him. I evaluated his symptoms. Frankly, it's probably adenovirus. I made the choice to give him some bacterial eye drops, sent him on his way. And he sent several follow-up messages to the clinic expressing, concern over a cough. Again, I think I'm right. I think adenovirus, but he's not my patient. I chose not to answer these messages. He had kind of annoyed me. And I actually found out after he left that he had been complaining to the front desk that at 12 minutes late, I was not treating him like his regular physician. 12 minutes late, my friends. Made me wonder, where have you been getting care all of this time? Anyhow, so he's on my schedule for tomorrow. And I looked in his chart. He's sent several messages about having a cough, detailed descriptions of, okay, well, now he has the cough still, but his sore throat is gone, blah, blah, blah. It couldn't be COVID, blah, blah, blah. And it sounds like on Friday, when he was put on my schedule for Monday, that he was expressing that he wanted amoxicillin, that he, had that before, and he knew that that would be the right thing. So my friends, he is on my schedule because he expects the antibiotics for what is probably adenovirus. And I saw all of this and immediately just felt irritated, pissed off, annoyed. I'm like, why do I have to see this guy? He's a jerk. Doesn't seem to believe in science. And I am a younger woman, and he normally sees an older white man. So I can't help but think, okay, there's probably also a gender and age disparity sort of judgment sort of thing going on. right? So all of these thoughts are swirling in my head as we speak. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to come on here. I'm going to talk about this because the reason why you are probably listening is that you, like me, are probably sort of an anxious overthinker. And it's really easy for us to encounter patients, and certainly patients like this, but certainly any patient, right, that has us worried or having some other kind of emotion, right? It's very common for many of us to experience a lot of anticipatory anxiety. And sometimes that might be for a particular patient, right? It might be a situation like this where you know the guy is going to come in and think that he knows exactly what he needs and that the answer is inappropriate antibiotics, right? I'm assuming it's going to be inappropriate. Let me put it that way. But there's other situations, right? There is the worry that we feel before going on call. There is the patient on your schedule, let's say with a very different circumstance, who maybe has chronic pain or some kind of unclear illness or some kind of illness, disease process that just really doesn't get fixed. Endometriosis, fibromyalgia, of course, those are pain conditions, but they're more complicated, right, than simple garden variety pain. It's very common in my experience for us to experience anxiety, anticipatory anxiety in particular, for not knowing how it's going to go, feeling emotions of dread, worry, anxiety, frustration, feeling like you're stuck, like you have no options. And so I noticed in myself, in looking at this particular thing that's on my schedule for tomorrow, that I was just feeling a lot of yuck. And immediately my thoughts were kind of swirling around. And so I'm going to talk myself through a little bit of a process here of how can I move through this tonight so that I can sleep and not be, kind of in this state, because I've been in this place before and sometimes I've not slept, even over something as stupid as this guy wanting probably inappropriate antibiotics, right? But here we are. Let's talk through it because I know that I am not alone. All right. So my first step here is I'm going to get curious. Why does this particular situation make me have these feelings, right? I would describe my feelings as annoyance, irritability, frustration. I have this desire to just say, nope, I won't see him. To just blast off a message that gets sent to him of, I'm not giving you antibiotics, go away, or, that I just would refuse to see him. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but I'm having all these feelings for someone coming in with a cough, right? Which is a standard primary care situation that I evaluate all the time, right? All the time. Why is this creating these feelings in me? Well, I'll tell you a few reasons. Like, one, this guy just gave me a bad vibe before. He was rude. He, in my mind, I don't know this for sure, but in my mind was judging me for A, not being his regular doctor, which not my fault, B, not being a man, C, being younger than him, D, running 12 minutes late again. Where the hell was this guy getting care before he came in to see us, right? There's a lot of factors here that are about him in particular that are bothering me, right? They're triggering a yuck feeling. And when somebody's like that, I'm a highly relational primary care person. I don't like doing urgent care type visits. I prefer to have a long-term relationship, and I do not want a relationship with this guy. I actually don't want to see him ever again, to be quite honest, just because he just leaves a bad taste. But also, I also get annoyed by people coming in and demanding antibiotics, or, when the reason for the visit is need antibiotics for sinus infection or some other dictatorial type command as the chief complaint. Not, evaluate cough symptoms, evaluate for possible sinus infection. When it's more declarative than that, I know that that just bothers me because there's something about the situation, right? That when the patient puts that down or says that to someone who's scheduling the appointment, I interpret that as they have already diagnosed themselves, despite usually not being in medicine at all. And they think that I'm a vending machine in which they can come and demand whatever care it is that they want, right? In this particular situation, all of those things are activated in my brain. And again, I don't know, he was on my schedule as of Friday and I didn't happen to actually see it. But of course, now that I've seen it, I'm like, ugh, kind of swimming in these thoughts and feelings, right? If I can stop and get curious, what is going on in this particular situation, right? I can identify some thoughts. I don't like people coming in feeling like they can just demand a certain treatment. Now, there are times, right, when they might come in very appropriately and, and think that they might want a treatment and ask about it and have questions about it, or they've been thinking about it, they've been doing some research. But in this situation, I don't know, I think you make your own judgment about this, but particularly when people are just like coming in demanding antibiotics, they aren't thinking very much, right? They're just like, oh, give me this thing. I know I need it because I had this before. I'm just like so bothered by the situation, right? It is setting off thoughts like my expertise doesn't matter. My evaluation doesn't matter, right? The underlying theme here is that I expect not to be valued for my time, my expertise, right? My clinical acumen, whatever. I'm anticipating not being valued. So it makes sense, right, that I'm having all of these big thoughts and emotions swirling around. Now, we could, do a very similar process. And I actually did this with a client over the weekend, thinking about a different patient that she has a visceral reaction to when this patient is on her schedule. Why does that come up? Well, that patient has unfixable medical conditions, right? And so when my client sees this person on her schedule, she has some sense of dread and anxiety because she thinks, right, our automatic default thought is I have to fix this person, right? I have to offer them, a diagnosis and a treatment. And as we know in primary care and other specialties, right, sometimes we don't have a great diagnosis. Sometimes we don't have a great treatment. There are many situations like that. And of course, as helpers, as healers, it's challenging for us not to be able to help fix and relieve people's suffering, right? So if you encounter these kinds of situations, right, where you're filled with this anticipatory emotional, ugh, what is going on? Do you have a particular history with that particular patient, or does that patient remind you of someone else, or does it trigger thoughts about a certain situation? What's underlying all of that, right? Get curious. What is bringing up these feelings, right? When we get curious, we get a little insight, right? So I've shared, okay, if I stop and think about all of these things, I can see very clearly why I'm bothered by him being on my schedule, right? When I get curious, when I understand that, I can have a little self-compassion. I'm not going to go on a self-compassion tangent. We'll talk about that another time, but I want to move on to the next step, which is naming my options. Now, before I had had any coaching at all, if someone asked me, well, what are your options here? I wouldn't have thought that I had any options. If he's on my schedule, I don't have any choice. I have to see him, right? It doesn't matter how I feel, doesn't matter what I think. Like I don't get a say. And That may or may not be true, but that doesn't mean that I don't have options, right? I mean, I will say that probably no one's going to throw me in handcuffs if I choose not to see him. I'm not going to go to jail. No one's going to put a gun to my head. I don't actually have to see him. And in this particular instance, I thought about that. I thought, I could refuse to see him. I could send back some kind of a nasty message and say, nope, I'm not going to guarantee you antibiotics. I'm not going to prescribe you the requested amoxicillin. It's not as simple as you show up to my clinic and you get antibiotics. I will evaluate you, but don't walk in here thinking that your presence in the building gives you antibiotics, right? I thought very hard about sending a message along those lines. I chose not to. What else could I do? I could call out sick. I'm just laying out options here, right? There's a number of different possibilities. And at this stage, I don't need to commit to any of them. But how many options can I think of, right? I could say, he needs to wait to see his primary care provider. I could say, his primary care provider needs to add him on. I could say, I will never see him. I could say, I will see him, I don't know, for 5. There's all sorts of different possibilities here. And when I explored those options in this instance, I decided that what felt right to me is that, yes, I will ask him to take a COVID test, which is in alignment with our policy. Yes, I'm going to ask him to wear a mask. If he does not agree to do those things, then I'm going to choose not to see him because that is a reasonable standard for what we have outlined in our clinic. But let's assume that he chooses to play along and he chooses to go forward with that. I will see him and I will evaluate him. And I will decide what I think is appropriate. But I'm also going to be just fine if I decide, nope, antibiotics are not indicated here. I'm not going to just assume that he has adenovirus until I evaluate him. It'll be in my differential, guys. Having had adenovirus, right, and having had a cough and having had conjunctivitis, right, it's a leading diagnosis, a very reasonable diagnosis, but I'm not going to just assume that he has that until I evaluate him. If I feel he's appropriate for antibiotics, I will give them as I would to anyone. But I'm going to choose to stand with my integrity and say, nope, in my clinical opinion, this is not indicated if that's what I feel. And, thinking through this a little bit more, I don't really care what happens on the other side of that. That is, if he's upset, that's okay. If he's disappointed, that's okay. If he complains about me, that's okay. I can make other choices on the other side of our visit as I feel is appropriate. But I choose to go into this visit knowing that whatever I think is appropriate is going to be my decision. And this is a lot of thinking about this particular situation, but I just want to demonstrate how I am helping myself through the yucky emotions. And am I going to do this with every patient? Absolutely not. There's not time in the day, right? But I just want us to see that I can consider all the options. And in fact, it's a great brain exercise when you've got somebody on your schedule, someone that you see regularly, there's a patient that just, kind of rubs you the wrong way for whatever reason. Think about all of your options, even the ones that seem really silly. Because when we do that, we are expanding our mind. We're getting out of a stuck place. And even if a lot of the things that end up being on the list of options don't seem appropriate, like I'm not going to call out sick to avoid seeing this guy. I'm not afraid of him, right? he can leave a bad review. I don't care. I know that as long as I am acting appropriately and appropriately evaluating him, he is free to have his own opinion. And frankly, I don't care. Now, I would not have had this same confidence in years past, but I do now because I have thought about it and I've worked my way through it, right? And again, I just want to say that out loud because sometimes we have it in our mind that if I don't take care of this person in the way that they expect or someone else expects, right? If I don't do the things that they want, that somehow I'm going to be harmed. And I can't really even think of a situation where that would really be true. But I think it's easy for us to go there in our mind, right? So really name your options. The third thing is a little bit more of a challenge, but such a good step to take here, which is I'm going to decide how much more energy, brain space, or time I'm going to give this guy. And it's not really me giving or not giving it to him. It's really me choosing to either let him live on in my brain as this annoyance, right? As this person that I don't want to see, as this yuck feeling. Or if after I'm done wrapping up this recording, I'm going to choose to let him go. I happen to be recording this late on Sunday. I always take a bath before I, well, okay, not always. I usually take a bath before going to bed, and I'm going to go take a bath, and I'm going to read a book. I'm going to brush my teeth, and I'm not giving him any more brain space or time. Now, again, I'm going to lay down some conditions, some very reasonable conditions under which, he needs to sort of comply in order to be seen by me. He's welcome. He's absolutely welcome to go to any of the Doc in the Box clinics anywhere. And, he can pretty much demand antibiotics anywhere else, right? If he won't sort of follow appropriate guidelines and rules. But I'm not going to give him any more space in my brain, any more time in my thoughts. If he shows up, if he's wearing a mask, if he has a negative COVID test, which, yes, we are still asking people to do when they're coming in with symptoms, I will see him. I will evaluate him. I will get his note done as quickly as possible, and I will send him on his way. And then perhaps I will tell the staff to put a note on his chart that I will not see him again. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But the problem here, if you're anything like me, right, is that so often we take these people home with us. We keep them at home with us, right? We keep them in our brain. We give up our time and energy to them and their situation, and we sit and we fret and we worry and we dread. And I don't want to do that anymore. I'd so much rather spend a little bit of time getting curious, right? Figuring out, why is this bothering me? Why am I so worried about this? Quickly going through my options and then making a conscious decision. Okay, all right, that's it. This is how I'm going to deal with the situation based on what I know right now. That's enough. And I'm going to let it go. Now, it's possible that when I'm done recording, that maybe I'm going to need to do something to, kind of soothe myself. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you know that I love this handshaking technique where you are imagining yourself flicking water off your hands kind of as hard as you can. You get your hands up there and really flick, and you do that motion for 30 to 60 seconds. I love that. I love that between patients. I love that when my kids are bothering me and I need to go in the bedroom and hide and just let it go, right? I love that technique because it feels like it's doing something helpful to my nervous system, and then I can get back online, right, and go on. So yeah, I might need to do that after I'm done recording here so that I go and enjoy my bath, right? That I wake up in the morning, ready to go. I am present for, my family in the morning, for the other patients that I have on the schedule. And that I just don't let this imaginary version of this guy live in my brain. Now, using a different tool that I learned from Brene Brown, right? If I assume that this guy is doing the best that he can, right, which sometimes is harder to do than other times, right? I hear it. He's got a cough. He's unhappy about it. He feels like it's lasted longer than he would like. We've been there. We've done that, right? We've all experienced that. I get it. He wants it to go away. And, he thinks antibiotics are going to be the answer. I don't know, right? Is there anything in there that is terrible? No. There's nothing in there that's terrible. I'm thinking to myself, what's terrible is his approach and interaction with the clinic. But it's not that bad, to be honest. And again, this guy really doesn't deserve to live on in my brain, and so I'm going to let him go. Now, this situation that I've described, and I know it sounds silly and I know it sounds ridiculous, but this stuff comes up over and over and over again in medicine. And we can sit here and judge ourselves, right, for feeling certain ways, right, because we shouldn't feel this way. I get why I feel this way. I get it. It makes sense to me. And I'm like, oh, okay, right? And I have the option, right? I have many options, really, of how to deal with this situation. And for me, I'm not going to make a ruckus. I'm not going to refuse to see him. I'm choosing that, even though he bothers me. That's okay. I'm okay. I can handle seeing him. I can handle evaluating him. Again, so long as he's fitting my boundaries, right? And not making me sick with, again, what very well could be adenovirus. I don't want that again. There are absolutely situations that are much more complicated than this. There are situations where people are so incredibly rude or disruptive or dangerous or threatening, where this process probably doesn't make sense, right? It's not enough. But hopefully those particular circumstances are few and far between for you. Now, I know that some of us in emergency medicine, for example, might be facing a lot of that. And I thank you for what you're doing, right? But a lot of the times, the situations are far more benign, and we can go through this process and decide that we're going to be more in our bodies, in the present, rather than sitting here worrying about what the schedule holds, what the day is going to bring in, right? Because that doesn't help. There's a part of us that thinks that if I worry about this now, I don't have to worry about it later. I guarantee you that doesn't work. And you know from your lived experience that that doesn't help you. It actually just drags out the experience. So my friends, let's let that go. All right, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you, as always, for listening. I'm experimenting with a new sound setup, so I hope that sounds good. We'll see. Again, feel free to leave me some feedback. And I want to invite you as well to consider contributing to the podcast. As many of you know, I coach and I work as a physician, but this podcast has truly become something that I really value, and I love doing it. And it does take up time and energy in order for me to, provide you with what I hope is an enjoyable experience, right? I hope that these episodes really help us to think about, the experiences that we get stuck in, to reflect. I hope that in the stories of the guests that you hear, you get to hear inspiration. You get to hear from people who have, been through different trials and tribulations, some of which are going to resonate with you, and that helps you. I think it's incredibly cathartic and healing to be able to hear that we are not alone, in the frustrations, the annoyances, the anxieties, the hypervigilance that we experience. We are not alone. So if this podcast means something to you, and if you would like to help sponsor it in order to help keep it independent, to help fund the expenses that go into it, because it is not a completely free endeavor, I invite you to click the link to support the show in the show notes. You can contribute a small amount monthly, and that helps to defray some of the costs. I have been getting a lot of requests for ads that I can incorporate into the show, and I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I really don't want to do that to people because I don't love listening to ads that are in the show. But I would also appreciate that if you love the show, if you tune in each week, if you appreciate the content, that you contribute a little bit towards it. And that really helps me to be able to, continue to offer you these high quality episodes. At least I hope that you think that they're high quality. Otherwise, why are you listening? All right, I'm getting punchy. It's late. So please consider supporting the show. Again, you can be a contributor by clicking the link. I have a lovely contributor waving hi, who gives me $5 a month. And it's such a small little gesture. That's less than a cup of coffee, right? But it's something that's meaningful, and I see it each month, and I thank her, right? Because it's a gesture of support. It's someone giving me a tangible thank you for what I'm putting out into the world. So please consider joining her, and thank you so much. Until next week, have a good one. Wish me luck. Bye.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.